Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Funnel Vision Show. I'm your host, Mikael, and today we have a guest that is going to help us really understand how you can really differentiate between brand and performance marketing and really tell your story in a way that really resonates with the audience, with media, with everybody out there. Because as we are very much performance-driven marketers, what people fail to realize is brand carries a lot of that performance. And we have an expert today on that, Lindsey Carnett. Hey, Lindsey, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you. I'm excited to talk about this topic because it's something that, people don't really like to invest in or don't think about it. And they just think, oh, well, Nike, there's a brand. So let's start with your not so humble bragging rights. What have you been able to achieve for yourself, for your clients? In other words, why should people listen to this episode?
Sure. Well, I started out doing PR actually when I was a student in college. I played soccer in college and I double majored and I got a PR internship and wound up working for the company full time. And during that period, I secured a front page above the fold on a Monday morning story in the Wall Street Journal for a company called personalstrainer.com with a journalist called Gwendolyn Bounds. And my boss at the time said, Lindsey, some people can't even do that during their whole entire PR career. And I said, oh, really? Well, that was fun. I think I should do more of this. And so I went on to continue at that company and then wound up starting Marketing Maven. And when I started Marketing Maven, I was able to get an Inc. 5000, fastest growing companies in America, 2 consecutive years. We also got Entrepreneur Magazine's most entrepreneurial company in America. And we've since been working with some of the biggest names in the celebrity world and in the brand world, doing award-winning PR stunts. And I actually took Ty Pennington to Norway for a Norwegian design tour. Got to work with Gumball 3000 with a client of ours who did a sponsorship. So we worked with big brands, big events in almost every single vertical.
Wow. Okay. So you went from this playing soccer to now running, a really fast growing agency. So let's take it back a little bit. And I kind of want to dive into what you just mentioned about the Wall Street Journal and how that came about. How is it that you were able to make that happen in your first kind of try versus people can't do that like ever, So what's the difference? What did you do?
I think I was a student at the time, so I was learning the fundamentals, like the blocking and tackling, and then it's the application of all of it. And so I think a lot of people, just when they're telling their story, hang on to one piece that they think is so cool. But what they don't realize is the criteria for journalists. There are 5 factors: timely, local, quirky, hard news, personality involved. So even when I look for different clients, I'm at a trade show and I'm like, man, that is awesome. That I can do really, really, really well with because it's quirky and they have this personality attached to it. So there's the quirkiness factor winds up getting a lot of press. And I put together a Billy Mays pitch contest for OxyClean and wound up getting him on, I think, page 2 of the New York Daily News. And so there's a lot of really big thinking that can happen if you're creative, just by putting things together in a way that makes it interesting and checks all the boxes for media.
So when you think about brand and you think about like PR and brand messaging, so you kind of mentioned these 5 key components. When you compare that to something more like the digital space of like performance marketing, or like, how do you kind of compare those 2 things in your mind from your perspective?
So I come from the performance marketing world. And so there's always been this discord between PR and the performance marketing, because people think, oh, well, this isn't going to get me immediate ROI. But the thing is, it actually helps with conversion percentage, because if people trust it, I can show data directly from Google Analytics showing referral traffic from press was able to have more page views, lower bounce rate, and higher conversion rate, and maybe even a higher average order value. And so these things, when combined, I don't think you should do PR alone. I don't think you should do performance marketing, digital advertising alone. I think they're best when combined. And the evidence of this is these major brands that have been in the performance marketing space that actually did invest in brand and now have sold for $300 million. And so I kind of say, like, scoreboard, scoreboard, scoreboard. Look back at these huge exits that these entrepreneurs are having because they decided to invest in brand.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that, because a lot of people, they look at PR, they look at brand as a shot in the dark, right? Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work. It's hard to say whether or not it's very attributable in terms of ROI. But you're 100% right. Like, when I look at all of the data from Funnelytics, and we look at our clients, websites and funnels, we can clearly see referral traffic is always higher converting across the board. And when it's from an even bigger authority, then again, it's kind of like your friend telling you, go and check out this company. Well, the conversions across the board are going to be higher and easier to make that sale versus I just saw this random ad on Facebook.
Right. I don't know if I should trust them.
Exactly. Who are these people? I just saw their face. I don't know what they do and all of that stuff. So I totally agree. So walk us through then the continuation of your journey. So you were a student, you learned this, you got a pretty big win. When did you start Marketing Maven? When did you kind of go down that path of, I'm going to run my own agency?
Yeah. Well, I got recruited out of the PR agency by a really publicly traded company out of Sweden and Norway. So I got to go to Scandinavia. I got to bring products in the biosciences space from Scandinavia to the US. And then the recession hit and I jumped ship and went to my television media buyer, which is a multi-million-dollar advertising agency, started a PR division for them and commuted for 3 hours a day. I hated my commute. I sat in a cubicle for the first time in my life and I said, oh gosh, I got to get out of here. And so my husband said, you should start your own agency. And I'm like, what? I don't know if I could do that. And he's like, well, you got 3 months. Like, I think you can do it. And so I went to all of the service providers that I had known when I was the marketing director at this big Scandinavian company and said, hi, I'm one of you now. Can I tell you what I do? And they said, sure. So I got a shot from the people that I had given business to before, and I started getting my first customers. And my first customer was actually a book author based out of Malibu, and she wrote this satire called The Art of Overeating. And it's about, how Americans are kind of weird, like, no, I'll just have a bite. And so I brought in this sumo wrestler who carried this very small lady who was a psychologist and did all this really fun press work for her and just built from there. And I love my work because I get to be so creative.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about brand, right? Is you really kind of think about how do you get creative with saying the message and the story behind this company, because companies on the surface can be very, very boring. Like they can be just, Funnelytics. It could be a very boring thing. It's like, cool, you guys do funnel analytics. You can do data analytics. Like, that's the most boring thing ever. But when you really have that creative aspect, you can flip that and actually tell a pretty cool story around why this is important and all of that, right?
Yeah, we actually started using data at Marketing Maven to tell stories. So we have a market research component that we've built out as part of the Marketing Maven Method because it actually helps us find more stories. So we do a competitive analysis, look at the competitors, look at the number of mentions, look at the sentiment, look at what type of news stories they're in, and we're able to extract that information and we build out the personas and figure out, okay, this story needs to reach this audience. And so we have stories for different audiences. It's like if you were going to tell your parents something, it's different than how you would explain it to your kids. So you have to think about it the same way for your different demographics. And that's how we pull the data. We find really interesting through lines and explore them, and then go and build brand from there.
So let's talk about the Marketing Maven kind of methodology, the framework. You wrote a book on this. So first of all, when did you decide to write the book, and why did you decide to write the book?
Well, I decided to write the book because you probably get this in your business that people are like, oh, I know funnels, I know analytics. And you're like, no, but this is how we do it. This is what it means to us. And this is what this means to us. And this is the combination of that. And so I almost did it just to have a glossary, just so that we can be speaking the same language, because marketing is so complicated to so many people that aren't in the business. And they'll say like, PR it. And I'm like, what does PR it mean? And they're talking about like write a press release, or I don't know what they actually mean. And so I'm able to say, okay, there's media relations and there are press releases, but you don't call a press release a PR. So it's so that we can have a conversation together. So I'll say, here's the book. Now let's have a conversation about what you're actually trying to achieve. So it breaks it down piece by piece. And we actually have these 3 modules. The first piece is Insights 360, which is the market research piece. Then we have the Strategy 360, which is actually going and making a marketing roadmap, a blueprint to go achieve whatever business outcomes you're trying to achieve. And then the third step is Implementation 360, which could be event marketing, could be trade shows, could be performance marketing, could be building the brand, whatever it is, that's decided on from the research, from the competitive analysis. And we wind up finding so much out about their vertical that they're in, about their competitor set, more than they even knew. And we call this a blind spot finder, because when you're in there drinking the Kool-Aid every day, you just know what you know. And so to have somebody say, oh, your competitor is doing things this way, or they're responding here, we found out that there have been conversations and people have been making buying decisions in forums like Reddit, but that wasn't even on the radar of the client.
Right. Yeah. And when you kind of do that research, you start to really understand that all entrepreneurs and all business owners really do have tunnel vision at the end of the day, right? Like they think they know everything, and they really only know what they're focused on. And that's very, very narrow. So what is the framework? So those are kind of the 3-level categories. But if we were to break it down into, look, what makes a really good brand and brand message, and how do we get that out there? What does that look like? So let's say we're talking about funnelytics, right? And you were to take me through a framework as to, okay, how do we actually get the right message out there to the right audience? What does that look like?
Well, I would first ask you, what are your business objectives? So are you looking to take on VC money? Do you want to take on private equity money later? Do you want to go acquire other competitor businesses? Do you want to ultimately exit? And so knowing that, like, whatever the end in mind is, then we'd reverse engineer a plan to look and see what are other data analytics, performance marketing companies who have exited, and what do they do to prepare for that exit? And this is what we've done with, I just had somebody ask me yesterday, like, does anybody know a B2B marketing agency for call centers? And I was like, we've worked with 5 call centers, and 3 out of those 5 have been international, and 4 out of those 5 have actually exited their companies. And we actually help them prepare for those exits by doing the market research and seeing what things did these acquirers really, really care about in terms of building this foundation. And we've done the same thing in other verticals too. But we started out with the people that did not do the market research and did not have an open conversation with us. We are doing the blocking and tackling. And then later we hear, hey, do you think you could, maybe get me in Forbes? Do you think you could maybe get me here? And I'm like, can I ask you why you're asking this question? Is it because you want to get set up for an exit? And they're like, yes. And I was like, well, why didn't you say so? Because we could have just started with the end in mind and built out a strategy that continues to get new customers for you on this end, but then has a parallel track where you're trying to get to where you want to be in terms of funding, in terms of acquiring competitors, in terms of an eventual exit.
Right. Okay. So it starts off with the end in mind. So let's say, okay, cool. We want to go towards, and this is a scenario here, but let's say we want to go towards an exit. Okay. So now how do you start to develop or think? Because you kind of mentioned those 5 points of what makes a really good message and story. So let's walk through that process. What happens next?
So we would do some research and see what other companies in your category have exited. And then we would pick those as the competitors and then do the competitive analysis on those to see what kind of content did they have in their social media? What did they actually say in their press releases? Because probably you have to have something to acquire, like maybe you have a concentration in your customer base or the type of businesses that you work with. And maybe that would be a strategic acquisition for somebody. Or maybe your technology works in a certain way, you have patents on it. And so then we would want to make sure that we talk about your patented technology and your growth and things like that. So things that these acquirers would care about, and that would be built out over a timeline. Like, these are the types of stories that we would tell at these intervals to get picked up by these type of media that these prospective acquirers are reading. And that would probably be a combination of trade media, like in the performance marketing space, in the data space, and then also in the investment space. So business.
Okay, so we look at these competitors, we kind of understand, okay, well, this is what they've done. This is the messaging they've kind of put together. So how do you then take that and craft a unique brand strategy, a unique messaging strategy for the client?
Yeah, you want to be able to not be so out of character, like that you are a fish out of water and they're like, what the heck is that? They are a weird outlier and this kind of scares us. But you want to go with the grain enough so that you fit into the category, and then boop, you go swim off to the side by yourself as something very cool. So you have to have some unique differentiating factor, whether it be your client base, whether it be some patented technology, whether it be whatever your growth rate is, or the types of companies you've acquired, or whatever the unique pieces are. And that part happens through an interview. So it's funny what I wind up extracting out of people by talking to them. I mean, you probably see this in your podcast, like, wow, that person is more interesting than I thought. I just interviewed the founder of a construction company, and they are making laboratories for biopharma companies. And I thought, wow, this is an interesting niche. And I said, how did you get into this? Why do you know so much about laboratories? And his answer to me was, well, I was going to be a dentist, so I did organic chemistry and biology, and I was a biology major, and I went to USC, and I was going to go to dental school. And so for him, I'm writing his press release today about how it's come full circle for him for wanting to go be a dentist, and now he owns a construction company, but he is the go-to company for building out clean rooms and laboratories for some of the hugest biotech companies. So that is kind of like the Quirky angle that I was like, ding, 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 ding. We found the angle. This is awesome.
Can you repeat the 5 things? So you said Quirky is one. What were the other 4? Timely.
Local.
What do you mean by local?
So for example, like, what city do you live in?
Just outside of Toronto.
Okay. So in the Toronto area, so the Toronto Star, that would be an opportunity to have like a feature piece because you're a local business.
Okay.
So timely, local, quirky, hard news, personality involved. And the hard news, hopefully it's not like somebody died type of hard news, because that is sometimes hard news can be bad stuff, but it could also be some sort of statistics saying that, e-commerce has grown by another 20% this year. We all know that it grew during COVID, but now it's continuing its growth. We're seeing retail stores shut down and e-commerce is just prevailing. And so that would be hard news if you could site like Statista or one of these data sources that is giving that hard news, because that's a hard stat and it supports why you're doing what you're doing.
And the personality angle. So walk me through the quirky versus personality angles.
Yeah, the quirky could be like an interesting invention. Like I went to Cosmoprof trade show and I saw this silicone pocket hanging from this sink. And I'm like, what is that thing? And they're like, oh, it's called the hot iron holster. And I was like, what does it do? And she said, well, I first made it out of a oven mitt, and it holds your hair straightening tools so you don't get burned, because I used to be an ER nurse. And I was like, gosh, that's a really good story. And then I wound up representing them and helping launch the product. And then they got the little holster, the hobby holster, and got into Target, Kroger's, like huge, huge, huge launch, just from a concept from an inventor to massive. So quirky could be a lot of different things. It could be, just the way you do things, the way that you put things together. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, you have a cat as your mascot or some weird thing like that,
Yeah, that's fair. And then the personality side is really considering the actual person behind the story.
Yeah, exactly. And it could be that you, like for Funalytics, maybe you're doing this for, LeBron James's shoe company. He's one of your customers. That it could even be one of your customers that you had mentioned that everybody's like, whoa, you work with so-and-so? That's awesome. So it's just something to put you higher profile.
Right. That makes sense. So in other words, basically the playbook is we first do the research. First, we understand the end goal in mind, and we reverse engineer from that end goal by doing research and looking at competitors, coming up with our blueprint or our strategy as to what are we going to do in order to achieve that end goal. We look at our 5 core components of brand messaging, and then we go and implement that strategy to go and make noise in the marketplace.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. That's pretty cool. I really appreciate you breaking this down for us. I mean, I think you've given people a true playbook here. And if people want to learn more and they want to dive deeper with you, where can they get your book? Where can they learn more?
Yeah. So our website is Marketing Maven, Maven.com. And the book is available on Barnes & Noble. And we also have the website, themarketingmavenmethod.com.
Awesome. So check out marketingmaven.com or go and check out the book. We'll put all of that in the show notes. Lindsey, thank you so much for sharing this with us, and thank you for breaking it all down.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.